So today we're going to go over how to integrate dramatic quotes specifically into an academic paper. As you guys are working on your comedy papers, you want to be able to properly cite your quotes. So just an overall thing to remember is that you should use quotes appropriately and sparingly. Your paper should mostly be your analysis of that quote or of that play. You shouldn't chunk your paper with a lot of quotes as a way to just kind of like up your page count or up your word count. You should use them only when you need to. So some steps to remember as you're writing your paper is 1, introduce the speaker or the author of the quote. 2, state the quote. 3, summarize the quote. And 4, analyze the quote. So we'll go over those steps in more detail as we go on. So step 1, introduce the quote. Before you cite the quote, basically give a brief of who, what, when, where, and why about the quote. Don't just throw it in there and give a little introduction. So an example of this looks like in Act 4 of The Tempest, Prospero remarks, "Now my charms are all overthrown, and what strength I have is mine's own, which is most faint." Or another example would be if it is a quote that is not spoken by a character, you could say Hansberry, author of A Raisin in the Sun, writes, "The boy gives her an exasperated look for her lack of understanding and eats grudgingly." So both of these examples, you are introducing the quote either through the speaker or the author. Another example, Shakespeare starts out with some alliterations when Polonius says, "The wind sits in the shoulder of you sail, and you are strayed for." So again, you should either start out by saying the author of this play or the speaker in this act of this play says. Step 2, state the quote. So this one is pretty simple. The quote should flow logically and grammatically into your paper. If you are speaking about a comedic element in the play, your quote should be highlighting that comedic element. So you shouldn't just throw in random quotes. It should flow into your paper as far as what you're speaking about and, of course, grammatically. And the quote should support the subject of your paper. So again, if you're talking about comedic elements, you should not be putting quotes in your paper that talk about structure. So here's an example. This section also uses some biblical references to describe the transformation of King Henry in lines 29 through 30. "Consideration like an angel came and whipped the offending Adam out of him." Henry V, Act 1, Scene 1, lines 29 through 30. Shakespeare does this to paint Henry in a positive and godlike light. So obviously the reference of the quote has to do with him coming off very biblically and very angel-like. And of course, I picked a quote that highlights that. And it also flows into your paper. I didn't just throw in the quote. I made sure to introduce it. I made sure to kind of close it out. I kind of framed the quote. That's what you would call framing the quote. Step 3, summarize the quote. So this is if you have a particularly long quote and you are looking for a way to kind of shorten it up. You don't have to always do this, so this won't be for every quote because obviously you do want to have some direct words from the play, but sometimes you may have to summarize it in some, sentence starters to get that rephrasing your own words. So in other words, Shakespeare is saying that Romeo and Juliet loved each other so much that they decided to kill each other, whatever. Or this refers to this particular comedic element that Shakespeare seems to use over and over in his plays. So again, you only use